Okay, I am the first gringo tourist in here today, which is a good thing. And my friend there who is involved, he tells me, in restoration here, but also apparently in cleaning up things, which is good. This is just a general pan for kicks. He told me that these terraces were solely for the purpose of ornamental plants for the decoration of the Temple of the Sun, which was up there, and also the Temple of the Moon. And that there is some military function, but apparently it's relatively minor compared to the structure, it's everything that we see having been built. But there was some military up there. Here, he said this is most important because this is where apparently, if I remember correctly, astronomical occurred. So anyway, I'll follow his advice and go this way instead of where everybody else is going. Again, what's piled here are just the remnants of the stonework that the Incas had done, and it is alluding to the quality we saw at Sexy Woman. This is the Temple Alaugua, and it is apparently pre-Inca, which is interesting because I hadn't thought about pre-Inca. Now here are actually burial niches, which is an interesting twist for important Inca people. Again, much of what I see I will have no knowledge of unless I run across an English guide.
El 21 de junio
¿Sí?
de cada año, el sol sale de la montaña, ingresa por esta puerta,
¿sí?
E ilumina solamente el canal de agua. Ese es el 21 de junio, solsticio de invierno.
Solsticio
de invierno.
Muchas gracias. Más importante
Más
personas?
importantes de momis.
Mummies, yeah.
Este es natural.
Sí.
Restoration.
Sí, sí. Gracias. So the stone, because this temple is pre-Inca?
Yeah, pre-Inca. Tiwanaka cultures. De Bolivia.
Oh, Tiwanaku?
Tiwanaku.
Okay. Very interesting. Here's a very interesting thing. Again, this was probably for the water, for purification. We're somewhere in the area of the Temple of the Princess. Notice here again where there's water funneling down here. So it had a specific function. And what I think is most interesting here is the mixture of the natural rock that existed and the man-made pre-Inca structures.
Or the houses, this is pre-Inca, the cultures, this Tiwanaku, Bolivia, Puno, this granules.
Granules.
Yes,
Sí. Pre-Inca.
Yes, pre-Inca. The one's houses,
Sí.
this is prisons.
So all of this that we're looking at is pre-Inca, the Huanaco. And
estas construcciones se encontraron en excavaciones, investigación.
Investigación. Arqueología. So this area is all being excavated right now.
Este es el baño de la princesa.
El baño de princesa.
Purificación de las princesas.
Sí.
Esta, the three symbols, ¿sí? The 1, 2, y 3 symbols.
Sí.
The representation, the animal, ¿no?
Sí.
The one symbol, this is condor.
Condor, sí.
The two symbols is animal puma.
Puma.
It resembles the snake.
Serpiente.
Serpiente.
Sí. Ah, interesting.
El chacán. Cruzan bien. Este lugar es como un filtro de agua. Aquí el agua gira y purificado el agua.
Oh, pura.
Pura.
Ah, sí, so. Ah,
Máquina.
sí. Ah. Ah.
Muy importante.
Sí. Muchas gracias, señor. There's another original structure. Now this starts to give some kind of meaning to these water channels that we've seen in these other ruins. Now notice that this area has been excavated out. So over time, all of the area that we're looking at here will continue to be excavated. I don't know if my friend there just talked me into having a guide or not, but anyway, I think he said he's going to meet me up at the top there at the Temple of the Sun. But in the meantime, I will proceed to the right. Now, he corrected something for me. Those terraces were solely for planting the decorative flowers to be used in the temple. On the other hand, these here were used for maíz, in other words, for corn, for food. And so he has instructed me to go down here to the Temple of the Princess and see that, and then walk along the bottom here and up those stairs. So here we are at the Temple of the Princess, and I will slowly meander through here trying to garner what I can. So I'll go down to the end and then work my way back. One of the great pleasures of coming to places like this is trying to imagine what it was, from the hints that an amateur as myself can garner. Here we're walking between obviously two walls. To the right, was there a building? I don't know. To the left, certainly there are buildings. Notice that there are air holes, I'm guessing, or no, those look like water channels. Notice that large round rock. Did that have a particular significance? It's not finished as the Inca would have done. And I'm not sure either whether this is Tiwanaku or Inca. Always on the search for detail. Notice how niches are carved in that rock. One looks like a little bit of a stairway, and who knows what the other was. Again, maybe that was an anchor point for a wall. Now this is an interesting rock, a fairly narrow, large slab, too obvious to have simply fallen in this position, orientated almost perfectly as a wall. It also looks very much like a big rock that I could see in the valley as I hiked down from Pumamaca yesterday afternoon. Notice above me how apparently all of that has been terraced. Certainly there are stone walls for some purpose. As a novice, I can certainly imagine that that rock formed perhaps a backdrop for an altar. What were these individual rooms for, or buildings? Notice the narrow walkways that were formed between the building wall and this wall that we're walking along here. Here's some of the phenomenal rock work, which I was told by a woman from this area was in fact done, if you can believe it, by sanding the rock. Hard to imagine. All right, now from here, again, some very interesting things to look at. A large niche there, but notice you can make out all kinds of little stairways going up, or at least what look like stairways. There's one to the left, one to the right. This rock in front of me has a stairway that goes right up the center, right up through there. There's a very pronounced one going up, of course, that way. Notice at the top of that stairway there are two niches. Would those have been ceremonial burial niches? And notice the flat wall that's been made there. In fact, now that I mention it, I see several flat walls that I had not noticed. There's 2 or 3 of them off to the side. There's a large one, and underneath it another large one. But notice at the top, and I'll get up closer, that the rock has been particularly formed with those little protrusions, and also it looks like a shelf. Would those have been astronomical devices? In fact, could the stairways have been astronomical devices? They appear to be almost equal, but not quite. Could they have reflected, for example, days of the week or some similar kind of sequential time? Here's some very clearly Inca worked stone. And again, notice, apparently almost all sides were worked, even though they might not be seen. Again, notice here how the rock conforms to the natural rock, and you can see that there the steps, for example, were probably to house additional rocks that were added to form a wall. Notice here, very particular water runoff channels, and presumably above them were more channels to move the water to these two. And here perhaps another bath. You can see that the channel there, the large channel, was designed to move the water down and down that rock to create a little bath. And what were these little long indentations on the top of the rocks for? Now, if you want to play amateur imagining archaeologist with me, can you imagine a lady of great importance here being bathed by her 2 or 3 or whatever women attendants? And now we're entering into a room here because of the niches, and here a hallway taking us into another room even larger. Stairways going up to the left, but here perhaps the burial storage niches of important people. In fact, could this entire area have been for that purpose? I don't know. More rooms back in there. Just a series of little rooms, each with their niches of large size and the small size, for whatever that reason. Now we'll continue up the stairs here. Okay, now, whether this would have been accessible or not, I don't think it is, unless it was just some kind of storage room that we're in. Okay, it looks like that set of rooms that I was in is distinct from the set of rooms reached by that outer walkway that we were on, because they come into here. Now notice here again another bath or pool area there with the water channeled down through it. You can see the runoff channels coming out of that little pool right there, running down here and into this area. And you can tell that that's what it is because that stone right there is perfectly grooved out. And notice that these niches have recessed areas. In other words, I'll go up to it. Could these areas here have held large stones that enclosed that area there? That's my point. These large stones probably lintels. Okay, now we're walking into this area here. Notice a very small enclosure as a bath, water channeling in through there. I'm guessing it's a bath. Here the young men have climbed up what were stairs, but in fact were they stairs? They just may look like it. It may have been that the entire building structure went all the way up there. Maybe those platforms, which the men are standing on, were visible, or maybe they were not. Again, notice the fine detail. How did they carve this out? Simple sanding seems almost nightmarishly bizarre. And this lintel would look like Inca. Close-up view of these niches. If you look closely at this large niche, it's an arch. It's curved and perfectly smooth. And what was the purpose here? Were they little niches? They're too nicely done to have simply been done to stick a roof beam into. Now, is this a walkway, or would it have been a channel for water? Don't know. Now, taking a close look at this, I don't see any evidence of it having been worked at all, either on the edges or on the face, but yet it sits at the end of this very large, either a very large room or what might prove to be a group of rooms. Notice how there are two more rooms that cascade down in elevation. Maybe once they excavate, maybe they'll discover they're all at the same level. Now notice at the top and the bottom you see holes. Could those have been burial holes like I saw yesterday? Certainly this one is specifically designed. Now here are a couple of large slabs of rock that have probably dropped off the tops of as evidence that certainly these rocks occur. Notice how the edge of this one has been dressed back to allow for the wall construction. Now to look closely at this niche, and then notice here are some more of those what look like stairways, but notice they don't go very far, which makes me think they were just used to anchor a rock. But now here's a very curved out one, but for what function? So some of these niches, in fact all of them, were for offerings. For example, there might have been gold offerings, and they have a sun-facing orientation. They had a western orientation. So these niches again would have been as altars for ceremonies and to hold offerings, and probably gold symbols pointing again to the west. Look at this almost perfect rectangular solid. This would have been used as apparently an irrigation, how can you say it, like a dam control, like we would use boards on one, for example, in an irrigation ditch. You would use this in the same way, hold back a mighty big chunk of water. So here we have two very large bathtubs, for lack of a better term, or baños, and they were used for the purification ceremony, probably pre-ceremony purification. Again, you can see the water sources tumbling in here. And the irony is this is very much similar to Católica Iglesia, where and I think it was the cathedral in Lima, where the priests had a special room where they bathed and washed their hands prior to the whatever ceremonies they do. So when you look at that large niched area that is curved, that would be the throne, for example, of the king.
3 steps. 1, 3, or 1, 2, 3.
Animales?
Así es.
Sí.
Cóndor.
Puma. Serpiente. Ah, sí.
Cuando el sol viene, sale de allí,
Sí.
el sol camina aquí,
Yeah.
estos van a ser sombras de protuberancia.
Oh, the shadow?
Shadow.
Shadow.
Shadow is two shadow, y
Yes.
three shadow.
Ah. So specifically, those two protrusions, at a certain point in time of the year, the shadow of the sun would come down and strike past there, and the shadow would go into that little diamond-shaped niche that you see. And then the same thing would happen 1 hour later into the niche that you can just see the left-hand side of it there. The rest of it's broken away. So when those kind of things, those shadows occurred, you knew that was a specific day. Okay, just a note, everything over there that we just saw is all pre-Inca, and including the terraces are all pre-Inca. It's the buildings up on top that are the Inca.
¿Por aquí?
Sí.
¿O por allí?
No, aquí.
Ya, ok. Por aquí despacio.
My friend and I are going to climb up through here, which we've seen before, these kind of stairways to the top, and then maybe we'll hike over to the granary, which is there, although he tells me that road is very peligroso. What's interesting when you climb around these ruins is to see the examples of the same thing in the modern cities, today's cities. For example, I've seen stairways where the whole stairway was a stair, and then like on the Palace of the Sun at Teotihuacan, the upper part was less in width. But here you'll notice the trough for runoff of water. Now I knew there was a Tiwanaku culture. I'd encountered in Chile and I read about it, but I didn't realize that these extensive terraces and the temple we looked at were Tiwanaku and pre-Inca. Now a question, would this have been a wall, or would it have been just the height that it's at now? Now on these terraces, and probably in a particular order, were planted cereals like wheat, papas or potatoes, and maize, and I know in some places zanahoria or carrots were also planted. Now I'm going to guess, as I stopped the video to catch my breath, that what looks like a wall probably was such that it gave access to these steeper terraces, because as you can see from the stairway level I'm on, it would be difficult to reach it. Okay, it's at this point that technical climbing gear was required, and so other than building a level of terrace perhaps up there, they didn't terrace this slope. Now this stairway brings me naturally up to this next terrace, and hope the panning doesn't bother you. As I turn, the stair continues on up to this point, where I'm guessing if I go up here, which I will, it goes to another terrace, and this one goes even higher. Now here at the top is another room or two or several, and again, looking at the angle of this roof, I'm guessing it was a granary. It appears that there might have been steps from here down to that level, but they're gone now. An interesting question with granaries. Certainly potatoes, corn are known to exist in a cool environment in their picked form. But what about zanahoria? Wheat, I assume, dried, will also store. And these, I think, are flowers waiting for the sun to hit so they can open up. Okay, here we are at either an original or more likely a restored granary. And I'm guessing that the technology was so high in this context that there's a certain reason for it being high and of this shape. Probably that the heat rises and there's some way of it dissipating either out through the thatch roof or through holes. A stairway here taking us up to, I think these are also terraces, they're just very small ones. What's impressive is that every space was used. Notice the rocks for climbing up the walls, and then over to the side you can see that there are the water channels. And I'm guessing that they could use that water as it came down for these different terraces. This will give you an idea of what kind of steep environment they were working in. And imagine the guy working on that terrace. Of course, to him, this is his world. For me, it's like, where do I tie my harness to? And what a spectacular environment to have lived in. Extrapolating from the granary that we just saw a moment ago, that we just walked past, here are the ones on the opposite side of the mountain. And I'm glad this one's here because I'm not going to climb up there today. And it would be a bear of a climb. I don't know if those are granaries up in there. Don't think so. But look at this. Look at the size of that one. Another portion. And here a very large complex that cascades down the hill. I probably will try to reach that today. Just imagine the work required to get the stone there. I don't care whether the stone's already on the mountain or you had to haul it up. And my guess is that not that much stone was on the mountain because it would have eroded and then rolled down. Here is this huge talus slope that would have been a resource, but no slouch of a day's work. I'm going to wander down this edge between the thatched roof and the building. Notice either rocks or wood, I'm not sure, used to attach the cross poles. I can't tell for sure whether there was a second floor or not, but if you look at the light coming through the roof, there is the same principle that we use in Jackson Hole on roofs to keep air moving above the insulation in a roof. So by implication, they probably piled this thing right up to that point and then let any heat that existed rise from that level up. And just one more view. Now it appears from this point upward, the Tiwanakans chickened out and decided not to build any more terraces. I say that with most respectful humor. Now this trail will take us over to the other part of the complex, the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon. Again, notice the cactus at this elevation, whatever it is. Just an overview of where we've come this morning so far. I do have to go down and visit that artifact. I haven't seen that one yet. That's interesting. And this is where we are going, and my impromptu guide, I'm sure, will meet me there. he ingratiated himself so cleverly that I didn't even see it coming. I thought he was a maintenance guy. But that's good, because he's letting me do exactly what I want, and that is to cruise at my own leisure. Again, notice on those walls, which may have been terraces, I'm not sure from the rocks that are there, but notice the niches, which we now know be for burial. Okay, here we're approaching some other kind of structure. Now this appears to be a room in and of itself. Niches on either side. That would be appropriate. Although these appear to be doorways, and they're doorways to heaven if you walk out of them. But this would seem to be an ideal place for the important people to be buried. Look at the size of these blocks. Some have been worked. For what purpose? Who knows? If you look at this, for some carpenters, this would be a familiar artifact. It's carving, and then it's used for connecting two stones. You put like a bone-shaped device, one half in one stone, one half in the other stone. So at this point in time, we're in a military structure. This would have been the housing for soldiers, it's thought, who then had to contend with the conquistadors, and unfortunately unsuccessfully. Interesting twist, in this building these niches are for offerings, because these niches face to the solstice in December. Okay, we're up on top almost. Anyway, this rock sitting right here, this whole area is called the llama, the animal, but this rock is such that a shadow from somewhere up there on the mountain, on the western solstice, whatever that one is, the shadow hits right in that little niche right there. Okay, my friend turned guide has just given me the philosophy, I guess you'd say, of the layout, and that is of the llama. So where we're standing right now is right up here at the head of the llama. We're right near, that's the stone we just looked at. And then the buildings that I'll show you going right now, notice how they cascade up, and notice how that wall is jagged. Okay, those are the ears of the llama. Now the trail that I just walked along from the granaries that we looked at earlier is this line along here. That would represent the body of the llama, at least the top of it. And then this would be the tail, both the granaries and those terraces there. And then here are 4 sets of stairs, one of which I climbed up, that represent the legs. And then the last thing is over here there are 5 or 6 buildings that are the Temple of the Sun, and they represent the teeth of the llama. And the teeth of the llama would have been those huge stones that you see there, that we'll go down and look at in a moment. Okay, so right there, below the neck, if you will, is the Palace of the Luna, in other words, the Palace of the Moon. And in the lower right-hand corner is where there was the throne of the person who was most important astronomically in this community. And you can be sure he was very important. So again, here we're in a room for the soldiers. And here the niches would have had icons of various animals that they perceived as deities who would protect them. Okay, and then this wall is the rear wall that is for the protection, presumably against the conquistadors, because I don't think there was anybody else that was contesting Tiwanaku. And while I'm panning through the rest of these buildings, probably related then again to the military, and it was the Tiwanaku. This is not Inca. He's indicating that the height of the mountain, the highest height, is about 8,000 kilometers. That puts it at 24,000 feet. I don't think so. but I don't know. Okay, now el baño para de purification?
Sí, purificación baño. Y también luego para irrigation.
Coming out of there also is the irrigation water that can be then used for irrigation. That valley, for the record, is Machu Picchu Valley. Now, one of the things to notice is what look like normal roads are, in fact, as one could well imagine, Inca roads. In other words, the original trails the Incas used. And just like any other part of the world, many roads until modern times, when we had the equipment to alter the terrain, were in fact original roads that we just expanded the use of. Okay, now we're talking Inca. These stones, this one estimated to weigh maybe 40 tons. These came from about 7 kilometers away, hold on to your chair, up there, believe it or not, were transported apparently by rolling them on logs down into the valley, across the valley, and then up. What you can see there is what looks like a terracing, but if you followed along here, it in fact is a ramp. And that ramp came all the way up to here. And that's where these big stones came from. And we'll see stones that range anywhere from 30 to apparently 60, 70 tons. Okay, now these protrusions serve a different function. They are actually designed to lock in place other large stones to reduce the impact of earthquakes which can occur in this area. This was probably the most important place in this entire valley. And you can think of it as the backdrop of a large altar, if you will. What you have in the center, and I'll go closer so you can see it better, we can see it better, is again a 3-part representation. You'll notice that the left side of that illustration gives us the signal of the 3, but anyway, it's the condor, the puma, and the serpiente. Now, one thing to remember is that this was never finished, primarily because the conquistadors destroyed the Inca civilization by then, so they couldn't finish it. These stones that you see sticking out, or portions of the stones sticking out, like this one down here, is supposed to represent the puma, but more importantly, this wall was used to define the solstice because it is facing to the south and to the right is the west. Surprise. And so those stones would have created shadows at different points in time. Now notice here faintly you can see lines, and perhaps those were used for measuring. These protrusions here, the guide thinks might have been just decoration, but they could just as easily have been astronomical in value. And here are, or what were to be, representations of 3 pumas. And the reason for the 3, while there's no representation similarly on any other panel that we can see for the condor or the serpent, is because it illustrates the strength of the puma. Notice the last block does not have any completion. I'm just going to pan around here so you can see some of the huge blocks that are up here that apparently this was either never finished or somehow it's come apart. But look at the size block in the back there, and notice how it's creating some kind of a corner. Okay, there you can see how long that is. And notice these blocks here. And here again is that connection device at this end and at that end of the block. Okay, now we're standing in the Temple of the Moon. And again, you have to remember these were not finished, because before they could be finished, the conquistadors did their work. But this is a very nicely finished wall right here. Notice again how, as huge as these are, he estimates 50 tons, those stones are precisely connected. There doesn't look to be a room to put a piece of paper in them. Now, what's somewhat tragically interesting is that this stone was in the process of being moved into place up there. Two things. These protrusions are designed, as well as the long one on that big rock, are designed for lifting and manipulating these huge stones. The second thing is that there is an example of a ramp being used to eventually move the stone in that direction, perhaps to complete that part of the temple. Okay, now we're actually looking at the throne of the highest Inca leader, the astronomy leader, if you will. This was his throne, and his princess was to his left. Now this stairway leads down to several very narrow terraces. These are very narrow terraces, and all these terraces were, on a continuing basis, decorated with beautiful flowers as part of the decoration of the palace. And here you can see this wall beautifully done. And notice that the throne has some additional work done on it. These two little ledges, and there some kind of a protrusion there. This appears to be natural rock, so we don't know whether there was something in between here or whether they filled it in. This part here is leveled on this adjoining rock. The significance, if you recall the drawing in the dirt, this being in that lower right hand corner and facing to where the solstice was, but also there was the solstice there, and then the solstice in December that was in this direction. And notice there are additional granaries that I could not see when I walked along that trail, including those up on top. Again, notice even more huge stones. Again, notice this large stone finished on 3 sides and the 2 ends, but the back end is rough where it was taken out of the face rock. And notice that this huge stone, where this one that was on the ramp to the left was supposed to come up, notice how it's got an interlocking angle there. And again, we don't know what this was going to be for. More huge stones there, and a wall of stones. I'm still curious about these protrusions. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme to them for manipulating a stone. In other words, why a long, thin outcrop versus these 3 blocks doesn't make any sense to me. On the other hand, here you can see these 2 protrusions could well have been for larger rocks that would go on, sit on top of them. Like pillars, and then perhaps that up there could have been for holding another rock horizontally. And here are a couple more stones, channel water precisely to. You can imagine what all this would have looked like. It was presumably covered with plaster, maybe painted, I don't know. One final look at this of the sun and the Temple of the Moon stones, but just imagine the tremendous investment required to bring these stones up here, not to mention cutting out, finishing them off, and in some cases putting them in place. And here we see more Inca walls, first 4 buildings. Okay, this should be the end of tape number 12. And now I'm going to pan down the hill just a ways so you can see this clearly Inca construction. Okay, here we're looking at that point, if you will, that I saw very early on would be to the east in this project, but presumably those were all terraces, similar to the terraces beneath me. And presumably, if my guide is correct, the terraces here were used solely for decorative flowers, as part of the decoration, if you will, of the entire Temple of the Moon and Temple of the Sun. Now, this entrance, which is the beginning of Inca construction, also shows those little nodules. Who knows for sure now what they're for, but you have several ideas. This looks like it was somewhat made into a platform, and probably again for various offerings. Probably more granaries up there. Notice this rock that has been worked to accommodate the rocks that will go on top of it. The implication of what this is in work and in pre-anticipation of what needed to be done is, in my opinion, phenomenal. It looks simple, but I think it's phenomenal. I can only imagine that certainly it was done one at a time. To us it doesn't seem that important, because we're used to a world of interchangeable parts, of highly predictable dimensions for all kinds of things, of anticipated, mass-produced, one item as a module fits into other items kind of a mentality. So it's hard to appreciate what this individual effort represents. The niches, again, including, presuming what my guide said, that these were for interment of important people. Certainly an allusion to and a continuation of Tiwanaka culture. Now, according to the guide, the Spanish did very little damage to this site, perhaps because they had no need or intention to build a substantial city down below. And here was a portal that probably led to stairs taking us either into a different room or up to this next level. Notice again the beautiful curving corner here into this large wall. The interesting thing about these stairs, which you may not be able to detect, is they're steep, they're high. In other words, the riser portion is high. They're a short people, and presumably as short then or shorter than they are now. I'm a tall person, and it's a bear to come down. And coming down and going up, I notice how many of these are large slabs. No way would we move these things without a front end loader. And these people do it by hand. Okay, here we get a plant's eye view. Granaries. Terraces. And the Inca terraced walls up to the Temple of the Sun and Moon. Notice there apparently were some kind of constructions I'm not able to deduce what those big rocks are sticking out for. If they were lintels, I could understand it, but if that's the case, then the portals are opening toward me and into a wall, and I can't see the logic there, so I don't know what those are. Here's some remnants of Inca worked stone. Look at the precision. I wouldn't know how to make a cut like that. I'd try to use a saw and then use some chisels, but it would be a pretty rough looking at best. Another bath being excavated out. Notice on that rock you can see how there's a trough on the top, I think, and it may have been, if it's original, feeding this bath to my left. Notice here's a natural alcove that has been worked with ledges and perhaps a large partial niche for some kind of icon offering. The terrace I walked up. Notice there is another stairway there close to us, and one over right beside that building. This is the piece of natural stone that has been heavily worked that I saw from up above. Now, just from what I've learned today, these indentations could easily have held stones that were either altars in themselves or icons in themselves. Those look relatively new, or at least protected, whereas over on this corner are older ones, it looks like, at least ones that have been exposed because they're so eroded. Who knows how far down that goes. What's fascinating are these three troughs. My guess is that somehow when I walk around there I'll see that water was channeled down through there. Okay, here's a close-up view, but I can't see any indication that they were used for water runoff, or there would have been troughs, unless the water spilled off of these. According to the guide of the last group, this was for surgical use, and he indicates that perhaps a human body would lie in that one farthest long trench, if you will. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you will see a little area, a little trench for runoff of fluid. And there's a similar one, it looks like, in this second middle trench. But I don't know if that makes any sense or not. With the skills they had, I think it's a stretch to say this was an operating table, but who knows. The one thing I did not hear him comment on were these three trenches, if you will, which are unique. I've not seen anything like this in any place. And if you look closely, you'll see that they terminate. In other words, they rise up to a higher level at the bottom here. I'm looking at it from this side, which is the bottom where of those upper operating slots, if you will, where there's supposed to be runoff. Given the skill that these people had, I don't see any evidence of that. One of the problems with guides in Latin America that are trying to speak English is there are many conflicts in what they say, and because of the language problems there could be misinterpretations. Plus, I think they make things up